There it is.
There we go. All right, everyone. Sorry for the delay, but thank you for joining us for the NIH Director's New Innovator Award webinar. We're glad you can join us. Just a couple housekeeping things. If you have questions that pop into your head during this webinar, please feel free to add them in the Q&A box. So that's a separate box that is distinct from the chat box. So please use the Q&A box for your questions. However, if you're having any technical difficulties or anything, feel free to use the chat box to reach out to us. If you have any questions that are situationally specific to you or scientifically specific to you, please email us those questions at newinnovatorowards@mel.nih.gov. We would prefer you send those to us via email rather than addressing them here because they're going to be specific to you and may have private information that don't want discussed in a recorded, publicly posted webinar. But as always, you're welcome to reach out to us at our mailbox for any additional questions that you may have. And this webinar is being recorded, and the slides and the recording will be posted on our website at commonfund.nih.gov/newinnovator. Please give us 1 to 2 weeks to get those posted because we have to make sure they meet compliance regulations. But we also really would like you to go to our website to check out all the great resources that we have available for your benefit. So we have FAQs, we have an application and award guide that helps you walk you through the application process, and it includes example applications as well. So I would recommend you go to that site to look through those resources. For those example applications, please note that they are older, and so they may not follow current funding opportunity requirements and instructions. So just keep that in mind that they're probably not going to fit the current RFA, and you should always follow the RFA for full instructions. All right, so to start us off with, I'd like to introduce our panelists today. We have Dr. Trish Lebowski, who's the program leader for the High Risk, High Reward Research Program and is in the Office of the Director. We also have Dr. Jean Carstilla, who is from the Center for Scientific Review and is the Scientific Review Officer overseeing the New Innovator Award review. We also have Ellie Murcia, who is our program specialist in the Office of the Director and helps with the High Risk, High Reward Research Program, mostly the budget. And I am Becky Miller. I am a program officer for the High Risk, High Reward Research Program, and I'm also in the Office of the Director. So to start us off with, I'm going to turn us over to Trish, who's going to give us a bit more background about the Common Fund.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks everybody for joining. It's really nice to see how many people are in the audience today. This is one of our most widely attended webinars and probably one of our most popular by number award programs. So I want to give you just a little bit of context about where we sit in the NIH. Although, as you can tell from where Jean and I are sitting, we're in our own homes at the moment. But where we sit in the NIH is in the Office of the Director. There are 27 institutes and centers at NIH, but we're in one of them, in the Office of the Director, in an office called, down there in the bottom, Office of Strategic Coordination. It's the office that runs the NIH Common Fund. And just to give you even more context, on the screen you can see a list of all of our current Common Fund programs. And it's a lot of them, and they are all over the place with respect to science, right? We have clinical trials, we have basic research, we have instrumentation grants, you name it, we have it. And the reason that we want to point this out to you, not only just to tell you where we are, but on the next click, these programs are all required by the way we plan them to have amazing resources for scientists all over the place. So check these out because they could give you and your colleagues access to all kinds of databases, unique reagents, protocols that are QC'd, even things like high-end instrumentation, like the transformative high-resolution cryo-electron microscopy program, right? So take a look at these at your leisure, and you never know, you might see things. There's also sometimes funding opportunities, but not all the time. It's not open every year the way this HR program is. But we're here today to talk about the high risk, high reward research program. And that is made up essentially of 4 different awards with the graphics here on the slide. These are all designed to support scientists at different ones at different career stages. But one of the things that's the same between them is the scientists are proposing outstanding, really high risk, high reward, high impact research. So to go through them, there's the Pioneer Award, the New Innovator Award that we're here to talk about today, the Transformative Research Award, and the Early Independence Awards. We have funding opportunity notices annually for each of these. So if it doesn't work this time, there will be another one next time. And for some of you, I know maybe you got close last time and you're looking to apply again. That is totally normal. It's usual that that happens. And there's always another chance, but it's only once per year. Okay, the next thing, no matter which one you apply to, and again, we're talking about New Innovator today, your ideas have to be high risk and high impact, both of these, okay? We do not require any preliminary data in your proposal. We don't require a detailed experimental plan. However, you need to convince the reviewers that you've thought really deeply about your question you're asking and the way that you're planning, the approach that you're planning to take to answer it. So even though we don't require preliminary data, it's not often I see an application that comes in that doesn't have some. So don't be afraid to add it. It is allowed, it's just not required, okay? And there's often questions about the line between how much preliminary data or not, or even more importantly, how detailed the experimental plan should be. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to give you a clear line on that. It's going to vary for each application. But one thing that's really important to know is that we welcome all areas of NIH mission science. So anything that's relevant to any institute or center in all of NIH is welcome here in this program. So that includes behavioral social sciences, biomedical research, applied sciences, formal sciences, and very basic science, as well as translational and even clinical research. Clinical trials are allowed. So on the next slide, we want to make sure to let, it all moved, to let you know that investigators from every background are invited to apply, and from every eligible institution. So in the back of the funding opportunity, there's a list of what kind of institutions are eligible. And it doesn't matter if you're not at a medical school, you're not at a research intensive university, can I still apply? The answer is a very strong yes. So we want everyone that has a great idea to apply. Next slide. This is a list. I'm not going to read all the names of our very involved and really wonderful NIH high risk, high reward working group. So the little acronyms after everyone's names there usually start with an N or maybe something else. Those are all the different institutes and centers at NIH. Okay, so we have everything represented there, from mental health to cancer, general medicine, nursing, you name it, it's on this list. So I think it's important for you to know that no matter where your science falls in the NIH mission space, yes, we're interested and your science is welcome. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is this New Innovator Award. So again, it supports unusually creative early career investigators proposing innovative, high impact research, high risk, high reward again, right? It's our second program. It started back in 2007. It's a single PI application only, so no, you can't have another co-I, a co-investigator. That's not allowed on this program. You must be an early stage investigator or ESI to apply. And what does that mean? That's an overall NIH policy that's not only for this award, it's for the whole NIH. You have to be within 10 years of your doctoral degree, or if you're clinical, if you're an MD and you do clinical training, within 10 years of the end of your clinical training. And you cannot have received some substantial NIH grant. There's a list online, you can Google it, of which grants, it's kind of backwards, which grants do not break your ESI status, okay? So if you have already received an R01, I'm sorry, but this is not the program for you. But it's important that you know your ESI status, and that you be within 10 years. Your ESI status should be on when you sign into your ERA Commons with your ID and your password. It should be there. And if it's not accurate, you better get it changed. And I can't do anything about that. So you email the help desk and they can help with that. For this application, you have to commit 25% of your research effort, okay? That's different than your effort, it's your research effort. So if you're a clinician and you have 50% of your effort devoted to research, then it would have to be 25% of that 50%, okay? The budget is flat. It's 1.5 million for the 5 years. It's dispersed in 2 segments, $900,000 for the first 3 years and $600,000 for the second last 2 years. It's the activity code is a DP2, and that's instead of an R01, it's a DP2. But make sure that, back to the budget, that you request indirects as well. It says that all over the funding opportunity, but every year people forget. So next slide. Just to give you an idea, for any NIH application, you should know the SF424 application guide, and you can find that easily with a Google, it's online. And that will have detailed guidance for every section of the application that you're filling out. However, the DP2 is a little different than a standard R01, so there's no specific aims page. Don't use that part. The research strategy is 10 pages, and that's the bulk of the application. That's your essay, okay? The biosketch, only your biosketch, nobody else. You remember, you don't have co-investigators, but you also don't have collaborators or key personnel on this, only your biosketch. Bibliography, don't use it. If you're going to reference things, they have to be in the essay, and they have to be within that 10-page limit of the essay. The budget, I'll get into a little more detail in a minute, but very minor details are required. Equipment and letters of support, no. So equipment meaning the equipment that you have on at your university or at your research institution. Don't use it. Letters of support are not allowed. If you need it, depending on the research proposed, you should include things like authentication of key biological or chemical resources, vertebrate animals or human subjects, biohazards, any of those things. If your research uses those things, you have to include those in the application. Next slide. This is something new. All applications are going to need to have a data management and sharing plan. Now, it's new not only to you all, but also to us. And we're all over NIH, we're kind of figuring this out as we go. But there's a website down there in the bottom, and that's the guidance you should follow, sharing.nih.gov, okay? So what this plan is, it's going to explain how the data generated by the project, by whatever you're proposing, how those data are going to be managed, and which data and metadata are going to be shared and how they're going to be shared. So this explains how you attach it in the other plans section, okay, in that research form. It can't be more than 2 years, so this is not gory detail, right? But these bullets, the indented bullets, are the elements you need to include. What are the data type that you're going to be generating? Any tools, software, code? What are the standards? How are the data going to be preserved? How will people have access to them, and when? Talk about the data access, distribution, or reuse, and importantly, oversight of the data management and sharing. If there are costs for this, you should include them, and it tells you where to include them, section F, and justify them in the budget justification, okay? These DMSPs, as they're going to be acronymed, are going to be reviewed. They're going to be looked at by the reviewers, but they won't impact your score, okay? If there's a award to be made, there'll be adjustments made at the just-in-time process. So you need to include it. If it's not perfect, it can be fixed if there's an award to be made. But it's very important. This is going to become a term and condition of your award. So you're going to have to do what you say you're going to do with the data, okay? So take this seriously, look at that sharing site carefully, and make sure that you include this part in your application. All right, next slide. All right, what should you put in that research strategy essay? Really think about it as an essay, okay? It's not a typical grant that you might be used to reading from colleagues or mentors or whatever. So in the very top, you have to choose and declare the project science area. It's a one-digit code, it's abbreviation. Jean will talk about it more in a minute. And it's the only thing it's used for is review, but you must include it and include it there. Then you want a description of your project. Describe how important the topic is, the overall approach. We don't require preliminary data, but again, you can include them. It's useful. In fact, I would highly encourage you to state boldly that to comply with the funding opportunity, a detailed experimental plan and extensive preliminary data are not being provided. However, make sure that there's evidence there that you've really thought about what you're doing very deeply and you're going to pursue the science in a rigorous and robust manner, okay? Make sure you talk about alternative approaches. Make sure you have a hypothesis. So you want to talk about innovation. Why is the work that you're proposing exceptionally innovative? Why is this a giant leap forward and not the next obvious step that of course you would take based on your previous proposals, papers, etc.? Why is this different and innovative? You should talk about your own qualifications to do the work. Remember, it's only one PI. You're very important in this application. So why you? Why have you been, or give us examples of how you've been innovative or creative in the past in your prior research, earlier publications, things like that. Talk about why your project is suitable for a new Innovator Award. Why is it high risk, high reward? Why is it not an R01? And don't say it's not an R01 because you don't have enough preliminary data. That's not a good reason. But the innovative leap forward scientifically is important. Make sure you state somewhere, usually near the end, people state that they will commit at least 25% of your research effort toward the project. And the bibliography, remember, it has to fit in that 10-page essay, include any important citations, and you can do them in any way, EndNote, use numbers, whatever, compress them, that's fine. Make sure there's a unique identifier in there, right? It can't be Lebowski et al. 2022 because maybe there's 5 of those papers, right? Make sure you can use a PubMed ID or something like that in there. Okay, the next slide. Some things to think about when you're writing this and how it is different than an R01. Jean's going to talk about the review process, but it's important to remember the audience that you're writing to and make sure that what you write can be appreciated by scientists, really smart scientists, but probably outside your field and perhaps well outside your field. So make sure that they can appreciate that the proposal, that the work you want to do is really innovative and it has the potential for very broad impact, not perhaps just within your scientific field, but hopefully well beyond that. You might think about, it might be helpful to begin with a description of the field, the current landscape, maybe current state-of-the-art technologies, boundaries, challenges. Provide the context for the work you're going to write about and why what you're going to want to do is so innovative and hopefully has a huge impact if it's successful. Do not write with a high level of jargon. Ease the reader into the jargon of the field, abbreviations, so on, things like that. Remember, they're very smart scientists, but probably don't talk in the jargon that you're used to talking with in the lab. Again, remember, we don't require the preliminary data or a detailed plan, but you need to convince those reviewers that you know what you're doing, that you've thought hard about it. And as I mentioned, identify alternative approaches. What's the particularly risky part of this project and how are you going to get around that? What's your plan to get around that? Maybe what's your plan B or plan C to get around that? And then finally, of course, you need to convince them that you're going to perform this research in a robust and rigorous manner. You're going to validate any new approach that you develop. Make sure you estimate numbers, like numbers of animals if you're going to use them, or human subjects if you're going to use them. Make sure you include sex as a biological variable if appropriate. If you're going to use mice, you have to use both male and female unless there's a reason. So think about including all of those things. It has to be rigorous. So the next slide, I added this slide in from last year. I really want you to take a look, and I know you can't click on this, but my guess is you're taking a screenshot if you don't want to wait for the slides, but you can find this by Googling. As Becky mentioned, we have a very detailed FAQ page. You can look at those FAQs for hours. You can go down that rabbit hole if you want. But odds are most of the questions you have, I'll bet you 90% of them we've answered there. So take a look at that. We also have really good details on the web about the application and how to apply, some really important guidance, and we have sample applications. So check out all those links, and remember that the policies might not be exactly the same as the current funding opportunity you're applying to, but they'll be darn close. And it gives you a good idea of how those people might have described innovation and the level to which they detailed their experimental plan and included preliminary data. We have, I think, only 3. They're kind of old, and we're limited by which awardees will give us their old applications. We redact them for anything identifying, but yeah, if you have friends down the hall that have a funded one, please feel free to tell them to give me their application. We'll redact it and put it up there. Okay, and the next slide. Budget. So you may hear from your colleagues that we used to do this in one big 5-year award, right? The new innovators would get one check at the beginning of the 5 years and just go from there. We can't do that anymore. There's been policies well above the NIH level, so that now these so-called multi-year funded MYF, multi-year funded awards, we can't do them for 5 years. Instead, we're doing them in 2 separate segments. Again, $900K for the first 3 years and $600K for the second 2 years. Remember to add indirect costs. You see that right there in big bold red letters that I didn't put on the slide? Please remember to add the indirects. That should be your grants folks in the grants office that do that. Now, one thing that this means is a really good benefit for you is that you can take no cost extensions beyond the 5-year limit of the award period, which didn't used to be allowed. So that's a good thing for you. You can deal with that later once you get the award and you're in your 5th year. So the next slide, it's a little bit more about the budget. even though we're flexible and that they're in these large chunks for 3 years and 2 years, you still need to include annual budgets in the application. But we only want a little tiny bit of information, so it's pretty straightforward. The two constraints are written there on the slide. So for the first segment, which would be September 1, 24 to end of August 27, total direct costs can't exceed 900K. And the second segment is again the next day, right? September 27 to end of August 2029. The direct cost can't exceed 600K. So do not put in 1.5 for 1 year for the first year and then nothing else. Okay, that won't be good. And again, do include the indirect costs in your budget. Okay, the next slide. This is a little bit granular, and you're going to want to look back at this when you're doing the budget with your grants folks to make sure it's right. So this is the form that you'll see, and you download it, and you want to click on project there. It's circled in red. Okay, next. Then here's the start and end date. Okay, so the start dates and end dates are always September 1st to August 31st. Okay, so the first one would be September 1st, 2024 to August 31st, 2025. So those are the dates that go in those two yellow squares. All right, the next thing. So section A right there, it's all up in that top part. Senior or key personnel, okay? You provide an entry for you as the PI, and that's it, okay? Nobody else. You include the appropriate level of effort. We already said is 25% of your research effort, and then add 0 for requested salary and 0 for fringe benefits. This does not mean you're not going to get paid and you can't use this money to pay your own salary in the grant. You can, but this is the way you need to fill out this form, okay? And then for other personnel down below, that is not used because there are no other personnel. But again, you can pay for them if you end up having a postdoc on the grant or whatever. You can use the funds for that, but don't fill out that part, okay? I know it's complicated. So then down below in the next page is section C. Enter a budget request for equipment if you plan to buy any equipment with this grant. Okay, so enter what it is and how much it would cost, and then you're going to need to justify that equipment using the budget justification form, which is a different form. Okay, next bit, ignore travel. I skipped over that, but don't put but you can pay for travel with this. Just don't fill that out, okay? And then finally, nearer to the bottom, the section F, other direct costs. This is for that data management and sharing plan. Remember, I mentioned before, if there are costs to handle the data, put those in there. It'll be subtracted from the total of the grant. I mean, it's not extra funds, but you put it in there, and again, you justify it down below in section L, okay, where it says budget justification. Okay. F, down below that, other direct costs. So again, you could add other direct costs, requested direct costs, anything else except for equipment, except for, yeah. So if you request the equipment up above in section C, don't add it twice for section F, okay? So you can't be added twice. I hope that makes sense. All right. Then finally, make sure that it adds up to the right amount, 900 for years 1 to 3 and 600 for years 4 to 5, okay? Don't make it, I don't know, 700 and 800. That's not going to fly. It has to be 900 and then 600, okay? Next slide. Oh, yes. As I said before, include the direct costs. That's really important. Your university or research institute will be very sad if you don't do that. Okay. I'm going to hand it over to Gene, and he's going to talk about review. Are you there, Gene? There you
I'm
are.
here. I'm here.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much. That was I actually enjoyed your discussion there. Uh, um, In our section of the program, my name is the only one up there, but I really do represent a team at CSR that works to review these applications that come in, and there are a significant number of applications that come in. The team I'd like to introduce is Stefania Sanger and also Shinrei Lee, as well as Alak Mulkey. So we have four of us on this team, and as you'll see, the applications that come in are equally split into two panels. So two of us will take one and two of us will take the other. I assure everybody that we're all coordinated and work together every step of the way to make sure that these are two equivalent panels. So next slide, please. So this is it's a lengthy process. It takes about 7 months of review to go through, and including the post-review activities that occur. It's almost a full year of evaluation and review and awarding. But the process kicks off this year with the receipt of applications. Actually, probably kicks off a little bit sooner as you're preparing your applications. But we start in when applications come in at the submission deadline, which is August the 18th, and we prepare for a two-stage review process. So when the application comes in, we then look at the areas of science that are covered in your application. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. And we split the applications into two groups so that they look the same in terms of the spread of science. And we do like to keep the full spread of science represented in each of the two representative panels. The first stage is recruiting mail-in reviewers. So these reviewers will review the applications, producing their critiques, their overall impact statements, as well as the overall impact scores. And then based on that information, the top scoring applications will be moved on and considered finalists for the stage 2 of review. That goes to a separate panel that actually meets face to face, or it meets as a group and is able to interact with one another. And all of the finalist applications are discussed. And final scores are produced, as well as critiques and comments that kind of exemplify the overall the thought of the overall impact of each of the applications. That's completed in March. So we go all the way from August through September, October, November, December, and between December and January, finalists are selected and delivered to the editorial board reviewers, and they will have several months to be able to go over these applications, and we finally meet in March to discuss the applications. Advisory council are in May, and that Trish and the folks from the Office of the Director will make the official awards there. And as you see, the selection of awardees are done by the OD and the ICs, and public announcements are done in September. So it effectively goes from September to September in terms of the whole process. Next slide, please. So the first step is the stage 1 applications will be assigned to the two equivalent panels. Both panels will reside in the Respiratory, Cardiac, and Circulatory Sciences branch of the Center for Scientific Review. That's where we live, okay? Has nothing to do with the applications or the science that is expert within this group. People see that and think, oh my gosh, I'm doing mine on, whatever topic, biobehavioral topic, the psychology of such and such. We can't go with. This is just the venue in the Center for Scientific Review where this is reviewed. We can assure you that all of the appropriate science and expertise will be available to be able to review your application. We go through an administrative review. We check for the completeness of the application, and also we confirm the ESI eligibility. Make sure, as Tris mentioned, that you are indeed an ESI, and also that it's represented on your Commons page. Applications are grouped based on areas of science as identified by the applicant. Conflict of interest will be considered for each applications, that is institutional, collaborative. So when the easy part is for us to be able to pick out the institutional conflicts of interest, we will also, in working with the reviewers, identify collaborative conflicts of interest should they occur. These mail-in reviewers will be recruited to cover all representative areas of science. Next slide, please. So we recruit the panel of male reviewers. I will say that I did mention about the areas of science, and as mentioned in the funding opportunity announcement in section 4, and section 4 deals with submission of your application. There are 9 areas of science posed there. So you don't forget to add in the agency routing ID, which is all outlined in your submission process, but in the agency routing ID, that's where you submit your areas of science. You could have, I believe that you're suggested to have pick out 2 of those 9 areas of science to put in there. That kind of gives us an idea of what area of science is. When we recruit mail-in reviewers, we actually ask them what is their area of science. So between the reviewers and the applicants, we match you up with the areas of science. We do try to keep it, in the relative realm of expertise within the area. Those areas of science are quite broad, but this is meant to be quite broad as well. You've been asked to write your high risk, high reward, innovative project to be able to speak to a broad audience of folks. So when the stage 1 mail-in reviewers understand that they will not have spot on expertise on these applications, but they're to look at it and to understand how you have described your application, again, trying to lessen the jargon and broaden the appeal for a more general expert audience within the general expertise of your field there. So we will match the reviewers with the science. There will be 3 reviewers per application, and they will evaluate your application based on 3 kind of DP2 specific criteria. Remember, the NIH has 5 core criteria. It's the investigator, it's the approach, it's the significance, it's the innovation, and it's the environment. Those are the 5 there. When reviewing for this mechanism here, it's really just 3 criteria, 3 basic criteria that includes or that is inclusive of the 5 basic NIH criteria. So the 5 NIH criteria are being used, but they're packaged in these 3 kind of novel criteria. What are they? The importance and potential impact of the scientific problem. Have you selected something that has the potential for impact? The novelty and the innovativeness of the approach, and the creative potential of the investigator, of the early stage investigator. So those are the 3 DP2 specific criteria that take into account the 5 general NIH core criteria. They're asked to write an overall impact paragraph that pieces together their thoughts of the strengths and weaknesses of those 3 criteria, and they also put together an overall impact score. Okay, next slide, please. So selection of finalist applications for stage 2. The selection is based on the rank score based on the male reviewers. Remember, that's a selection of the topic experts of the mail-in reviewers came in as a result of, or assigned as a result of their areas of science. So they will be in the general area of science. They may not be in the specific narrow hands-on expertise range of your application. In fact, we try to avoid that because it brings on different biases of the field there. We want to be able to have people look at it from the outside and to make sense, and so that they can see clearly the innovation associated with these applications. And the overall impact scores there. So that's the selection of the topics of the mail reviewers. For the finalist applications, we will have a panel of about 15 to 20 editorial board reviewers. Why editorial board? Well, they're going to be folks that that may not even be in the same field as your application, but they will be able to have your application. They will be able to have the three critiques and summaries that were developed by the stage one reviewers, and based on that, be able to provide their comments and criticisms of the application suitable for discussion during the meeting. So every application, every finalist application that gets to that point will be discussed in the meeting. And it's done such that approximately 20% of all the submitted applications become finalist applications, and all 20% will be reviewed during stage two. Oh, will be discussed, I should say, during stage two. Next slide, please. So editorial board, as I mentioned, will be about 15 to 20 panelists. These are senior members of the scientific community used to looking at broad science, experts within experts with a broad scientific understanding. Each finalist application is assigned to 3 editors and reviewers. The editors and reviewers will have access to the prior critiques and evaluations. And again, all finalist applications will be discussed. So if there are experts in the room and in the board that may not have been selected as the 3 editors, they will certainly get a chance to listen to the discussion, chime in, and contribute. I can tell you that over the last 3 years, when as I've been doing this mechanism here, which has been a wonderful experience, really quite insightful discussion by all of the reviewers in the room there. Scoring is focused based on impact and innovation. The release of the final scores and the summary statements for everybody will be accomplished for all the discussed application. Summary statements will include a final score along with the resume and summary of discussion, and not discussed summary statements will receive the critiques based on the first stage reviewers. Next slide, please. So if you have any questions about this review process, you can contact me. I'm the point person here. I will work with our team of 4 to be able to work with your on getting responses to you, and that's the email address where we can be reached: New Innovator Review at mail.nih.gov. Hey. And I look forward to continuing this process of chatting and having discussions as we go forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Gene. So now we will begin the Q&A portion of our webinar. If you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A box, please. We prefer that to the chat because we can actually moderate a little bit easier through the Q&A box. So you can go ahead and add your questions there. I've divided questions that were submitted ahead of time into different topic areas. So we're going to try to keep to those topic areas and answer as many questions as we are able to. All right, so Trish, are you here?
Of course, yes. I've been frantically typing in the Q&A box trying to answer questions in advance, but Hit me.
All right, we've had a lot of questions about early stage investigator status.
Yeah.
So how can I extend my status?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are many reasons that an extension can be given, and that includes the pandemic that we all just lived through. We all had that. What you do, just Google NIH ESI extension, and you can find the policies there. And it's not run by our office. We have no impact toward this. It's NIH wide policy. Okay. So my understanding is that they are very fast and they are very fair. So, let them know if you have had things that impacted productivity. It can be more than just a pandemic. There can be family issues, health issues, so on and so forth. And again, it has to be done through their office. That somehow magically gets applied into the ERA Commons, and then it'll be extended on that little line in your profile that says when your status expires. So it's not viewed as a penalty. No one's going to question why are they 11 years out or whatever. Don't worry about that. If you need it, go ahead and request it. Yes.
And a follow-on question about ESI status. So I've read that extensions can be granted for childbirth. However, I could not find how long the extensions would be. Would it be for 1 year or a few months?
I don't know the answer to that. They'll tell you that. I think it's standardized, but I don't know how much it is. Do you know, Becky?
It depends on how long you were actually out of your position.
Mhm.
So if you were out for childbirth for 4 months, then that's likely what your extension will be. That kind of goes for all medical or any type of leave that you took. They will just kind of match. Usually they'll match however much time you stepped away. That's what you'll get back on the clock. Another ESI type question. Does your ESI status need to be active only at the time of application, or is it necessary throughout the whole award?
Yeah, this is tricky. Well, for sure, not throughout the whole award, right? If you get a DP2, you will have broken your ESI status. You will no longer be an ESI if you get the DP2 award. So when you apply, you have to be an ESI. So you have to be within the 10 years and you cannot have received a large grant. Now, that's the application due date is in August, and we don't make awards until the following August. So it's okay with us if you're 10-year or extended 10-year, whatever the number is. It's okay with us if that 10-year clock expires during that year. But if you've received another large grant, then no, you will have broken your ESI status and you cannot take the DP2. So you might think about that and be strategic about when you're applying for which grants. It's sometimes, we can work with the IC and we can make things happen within, a month or so of each other, but usually we cannot because it's just too tricky. So you might think about that when you're applying, because we know that this process takes a full year and you should be applying for other grants. Remember, you cannot have two grants under review at the same time with the same science, okay? No scientific overlap is allowed for two NIH applications under review at the same time. So you can't use the same project and submit an R01 or an R35 or anything else. It has to be something different. You can have two of them in the system. They just can't be the same science. Sorry, I diverted the question there, Becky.
All good. Um, and we had someone put in the chat that NIH will approve ESI extensions for 1 year after childbirth. That's great.
Oh, there you go. See, you guys know more than we do. Wonderful.
And we have a question about another ESI about whether or not an R21 uh, removes your ESI
No.
status.
No, an R21 is fine. Again, there's a list, again, just Google, and we have links to it in our FAQs as well. It's a list of grants that do not break ESI status, and the R21 is one of them. Usually if they're small grants, a smaller budget, or not 5-year grants, that's going to be the case that they won't break ESI status.
And like, what if you are a project lead, like on a center grant? Would that disqualify you from receiving a DP2? And my guess is the question is also if it'll break your ESI status?
So if you have a project and you're a PI on, for example, a PO1, I'm thinking that might be what they're talking about. Yeah, that will break your ESI status.
Yes, the key is if you're a PI.
Yes, you have to be a PI, not a collaborator or, yeah.
All right. Let's see. Are postdocs eligible to apply?
You have to be eligible through your institution to submit basically an R01, to submit the grant. So my guess is that if you're a postdoc, the university will not allow you to submit unless you are an independent research scientist. So it'll be more controlled by your institution than by us. Sometimes we have people that are finishing up their postdoc and will be starting their new position in the fall, and they submit a DP2. So in that case, you want to get the institution where you will be an independent scientist and running your own lab. You want to get that institution to submit the grant for you.
All right. And another one for you, Trish. Can the DP2 proposal have some scientific overlap with a foundation grant or award?
Well, in theory, it's okay with us. It would not get kicked out of our review system because in theory, we wouldn't know about it. But if both awards were to be made, what happens during the just-in-time period is the program officer will reach out to you and say, hey, you've got this, I don't know, this grant from American Heart, and boy, the aims of it or the title or the abstract or whatever sound awful similar to your DP2. Tell me what the difference is. And if they're the same, then usually you can only have one of them. We can't fund the same science twice.
All right. And can you apply to more than one DP2 at the same time? For
Yep.
example, there's the NIH director's
Oh,
DP2, and then there is the
yep.
Ebenezer Award and
NIAID has
NI.
one. Yeah. Yes, you can't put two into the same RFA that we're talking about today for the directors, the NIH Directors New Innovator Award, but you can apply to both this one and the NIAID one, and I think NIDA has one as well. Sure, but again, no overlapping science. It can't be the same set of experiments, so that makes it tricky. And the Center for Scientific Review have these awesome robots that can pick that stuff up out of the blue sky, and then they send it to us, and then program officers make the final judgment, but that would not be allowed. So make sure the science doesn't overlap. The experiments you're proposing are not the same ones.
All right. And are there any limits on how many times you can apply?
As long as you're an ESI, keep coming. Yeah.
All right. And maybe could you talk more about the R01, or like taking on an additional award while you're still waiting for the DP2 review to be concluded?
I don't understand. What do you mean taking
Of
on
just if you could just maybe clarify more about what happens if you accept like an R01 grant while you're still waiting for the DP2 decisions to be made.
I see. Okay. Well, a couple different things can happen. So for instance, we make awards, let's say, August, September, let's say September, right? And you have an R01 in at an IC, doesn't matter which institute or center for this example, and you're getting that. They say that your R01 is going to be funded because you have ESI status. And so instead of the normal pay line, I'm going to make this up, 15%, it goes down to 20%, and you have a 19 percentile. So you're going to get that R01 because you're an ESI. So either you take that R01 and the DP2 competition is over, or if you got a 10 on your DP2, the best score that can possibly be received, then you might say, I don't want the R01 and I'll take the DP2 instead. But if you have like, I don't know, maybe a 20 or 30 or 40 on the DP2, a score that would not guarantee funding, you might think real hard about the bird in the hand rule applying. And if I were you, I would take the R01 because really what you want to do is be funded to do your research, right? So in that case, once you've taken that R01 with the DP2, with the ESI status bump, you're done. You're no longer an ESI. You cannot receive the DP2. So I don't know if that really answers it, but it's not a bad problem to have, and it happens every year that we have a few people that have to make that decision and accept a DP2 or an R01 and let the DP2 go. But usually they're not people that have the score of 10, if that helps. I've even had people that have accepted R01s before the DP2 is reviewed. So don't tell Gene that, because that's sad for him because they're doing extra work. I don't know about it until later, but just remember, reach out to me if you have that question. 6 months from now, it's a good problem to have, but reach out to me and we can talk about specifics.
We do see applications disappearing every now and then, and so
Yeah,
there's
that makes
evidence of
sense.
that. So we do
Yeah.
see that here.
All right. Trish, how well does this award interface with currently held KO8s or similar NIH awarded career development awards?
I don't know what interface means with respect to that. What do you think it means?
I'm wondering if they're wondering if they can hold both, is my guess.
Oh, um, I don't, I think you can hold both as long as you have enough research effort. It doesn't, what is it, the K99 R01? Yeah, is that what you're asking, Becky?
This was for a KO8, but I mean, other career developmental awards are included in the question.
Yeah, I think it's fine, but I'm pretty sure we have that on our FAQ page as well. But it's not a large grant that breaks ESI status. Obviously, it's a training grant or a career development sort of thing that's based on training, so that should be fine. But you need to have enough percent effort, and of course, the science can't overlap directly.
Yes. Okay. All right. We answered that. Um, all right. I think these are most oh, here's one. If the grant is awarded, do co-investigators or collaborators also lose their ESI status?
Okay, well, number one, there's no co-investigators, right? So I can't answer that question because that wouldn't be allowed. But collaborators for sure would not lose ESI status. You don't lose ESI status unless you are a PI on one of those large grants that have been awarded, not if you're just collaborating.
All right. Let's see. Could we submit a new application with revised or updated materials from a last DP2 submission?
So yes, but as you stated, it must be a new application. These are funding opportunities, brand new ones that are published every year. So it's not a resubmission. That's really important. If you resubmit an R01, you get a short introduction and you are expected to respond to the reviewer comments and so on and so forth. And it's even got a special suffix on the end of the grant number. It's the same grant number with an A1. That doesn't happen here. It's a brand new submission. You do not state anywhere, I've revised this proposal because the reviewer said whatever, right? That's not allowed. In fact, if you do that, it can actually be administratively withdrawn. So it's a brand new grant and you should treat it as such.
So
But you can
please,
certainly
please
do
don't
it.
mention, please don't mention that it received a score of this last time,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and they like this one, and that's not permitted. So
Yeah, it can be withdrawn, and we don't like to do that. We
oh,
really don't like it.
All right. Um, kind of answered something similar. So, can you apply as junior faculty that's non-tenure track as long as you become independent by the start date in the case of funding?
Yeah, that's fine.
I could chime in there too. During discussions, sometimes the reviewers ask the question, are they independent? It doesn't appear that they're independent. When the application is in, it did get the blessing from the institution. It did pass all the hurdles to get to the study section. At that point, we tell them the rules that look, independence is not a core criteria. Independence is not a scoring criteria. You're to look at the innovativeness of the application, and the potential for impact of your science, and the innovativeness of obviously you, the ESI. There's nothing in there that talks about your position as an independent or not independent. So, and we stand up for you.
Excellent. All right. We have a lot of questions asking about ESI status, and what will, like, different grants and stuff. So please go to the website. I'll try to find that link and put it in the chat for those of you who are asking specifics about that. But I think we ought to move on now to the application and submission questions, which there are a lot. All right. There was a question asking about whether or not the page limits are required, or if they're just a suggestion.
No, they're absolutely required. It's not just a suggestion. If you submit your research essay with 11 pages, you're going to get an error. So don't do that.
All right.
Sometimes in R01s, people try to put extra information into inappropriate places. They try to put extra information on research strategies, let's say in the vertebrate animal section. So when it would normally be 1 to 2 pages of the vertebrate animal section, it's 10 pages long. And so that again is a kind of thought of as skirting the page limits and trying to add more information inappropriately where other people don't. So don't do that.
Right, it can get your application withdrawn without review. So you really don't want to,
Mess around with that.
yeah, play by the rules. This is the federal government after all.
Yes, we like our rules and our lines. So,
Sorry.
all right.
It's for fairness for everybody, so everyone's playing on the same playing field. Sometimes when we talk about the size of the font or the size of the margins, sometimes people can squeeze in an extra third of a page, where other people that kind of play by the rules have less information accessible to provide there. So this is meant, those kind of bean counter type of things are meant to make sure that everyone has the same amount of space to be able to put the information in there.
Absolutely. All right. If we are working with vertebrate animals, does the protocol need to be submitted at the time of submitting the grant, or can we submit the protocol after submitting the grant and include the information as just in time? Trish?
So if you do not include a vertebrate animal section, the reviewers are going to see that. And they're going to say, well, this person doesn't know what they're doing. And they don't have a vertebrate animal section. And even though it's not a scored element, it's going to impact the reviewer's perception of the whole package. So yeah, include it at the time of submission. That includes things like the numbers, maybe an abbreviated power analysis or the conclusions of a power analysis, or how you came up with those numbers, how you would euthanize animals, things like that. If you don't have those, the reviewer is going to think, well, this person doesn't know how to work with mice or whatever animal you're talking about. And it's going to impact your score, even though it's not a direct score driving element. I don't know, Jean, do you want to say anything more about that?
I think you hit it exactly right. The fact that it's not an absolute scored criteria is one thing, but the way that it presents us is presented during discussion. It's presented prior to final scores. So that means that it can impact the score, although it's not. It doesn't have its own criterion score. It can impact the score, the final overall score of the application. So yes. So a lot of times they'll look at it and say, okay, administratively they may not have all the things there. Okay, but if it's clear that, or if you give them the perception that you forgot it, or it wasn't important, then it could impact the score there.
All right. Um, do we need to include information on training and responsible conduct of research?
That's a training grant, or that's a fellowship type of criterion.
Yeah, no, that's not needed here. We do expect you to be responsible, but you don't need to talk about the training requirements.
All right. I noticed that other NIH programs, I'm assuming NIH institutes or centers, have a DP2 mechanism. If our research falls under the purview of one of those programs, for instance, NIAID, should we still apply for the NIH Director's Award, or should we apply to the other specific programs, or can we apply to both?
Well, you can apply to both. Remember, with the science cannot be the same exact science. It has to be a different project. Um, you could apply just to one if that is more reasonable for your case. I mean, you might not have the bandwidth to apply to both, or, you might have one innovative project and, you have to decide which one you would want to choose. There are different eligibility requirements for some of them. And you should look at that closely because I think it's NIAID where you can only do it your first year as a faculty member. So if you're going to choose between them, make sure that you don't choose that one in your second year because that would not be good. But it's really up to you if you want to try to do both. You're certainly able to do both. The other thing you can do, and I think I saw it somewhere in the questions, you can also apply for an R35 at the same time as a DP2. That's NIGMS's sort of ESI flagship award, and it's a great award. And you can apply, but you can never accept both of them. If you take the R35, you can't get the DP2 and vice versa. And we work together, we talk to each other all the time, so we know what's going on. But those are two that I often see applicants do both.
All right. Here's another one for you, Trish. While I'm happy to portray my idea as high risk, I actually think it is relatively low risk because the data that could result is novel and rich. Is there a way to say this in the application so it doesn't undercut the intention of the mechanism?
Well, that's a tricky one. I think we would need to talk about that offline. But if you state that your project is low risk, I think that would not bode well in review. Um, but it's not only risk that needs to be there. It also has to be very high impact and very innovative. So on the scale of riskiness, sometimes some of these are not the most risky, but they're super high in impact or innovation. So it really depends. I think that would have to be something we would talk about offline a little bit. You can send me an email, I'll meet with you and we can throw it around.
All right. And can you explain the difference between effort and research effort?
Yeah, so if your appointment is, as I said before, if you're an MD, maybe an MD PhD, but you have clinical duties and say that's 50% of your total effort, that means of your total effort, you only have 50%, I would assume then, for research. So you're 50% clinical, 50% research. So of that 50% research, you would need to devote 25%, 1/4 of it to the DP2, right? So that's not 25% of all your effort. It would be what, 12.5%, right? Of your total effort. You only have 100% of your research effort, and we don't talk about it in terms of hours because we know that doesn't work. But pretend you work a 10-hour day. That would be 20, oh, that's a bad math, 25% of your 5 hours remaining for research. So whatever that is, an hour and 20 minutes or no, I didn't do the math right, but you know what I mean. So does that make sense? So it's 25% of however much time you have dedicated to research in your appointment.
All right. Um, let's see. Um, Without letters of support, how do we mention collaborators and what they will do?
Yeah, it's a good question. You cannot have letters of support. So what do you need to do? You talk about it in the research essay. You talk about what their expertise is, why them, what they're going to do on the project. Hopefully they would have complementary expertise. They'll bring something special to the project. You might talk about, where they are. They're down the hall, they're across the ocean, whatever. You might talk about how often you're going to talk. Maybe they're validating some of your findings. I don't know, however you want to use those collaborators, but talk about why they're essential for the science, the expertise they bring, and what your interactions are going to be. If you've published with them in the past, that's great. You should point that out. If not, that doesn't mean that they're not viable collaborators, but anything you can do to show that it's a true collaboration would be useful.
All right. And when considering innovation, is there a preference for technological innovation versus conceptual?
I don't know if there's a preference. I think I see successful applications with one or the other or both. Um, it's rare. It might be held against you if nothing is innovative. Like none of the approaches are innovative. They're all tried and true approaches. But if you're going to be applying them in a really different way, that might be considered innovative. It's really up to you to convince the reviewers. Um, but yeah, so there's no preference for one or the other.
Okay. So let's see, I think they were saying like are collaborators allowed and like so can you make sub awards to another institution to support recruitment of patients, for instance? And in the budget, would you need to specify their percent of effort, like a standard grant, or is it too much detail?
That's too much detail for the initial application. If you get to the point where there's an award to be made, you would need to specify that in the just-in-time information. But yes, it could happen as collaborators. You can subcontract costs out to another site. Yes.
Okay. Let's see. I guess there's a question, are bio sketches allowed?
Yours is required, but you cannot have them for collaborators if that's what you're asking. No, only one bio sketch, only for the PI.
Okay. All right. And we're going to move on now to budget. There are actually quite a few budget questions here.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so we will see. Right. So though we do not put in salary support for the PI, do we include co-investigators and consultant salary fees under direct and indirect costs?
So again, you don't need that much detail for the initial application budget. If there's to be an award made, that will be worked out in the just-in-time process.
Okay.
You should make sure that you have a budget in your head that you can do the research for the amount of money that's involved here, though. Because if you are planning this huge, I don't know, a clinical trial with 5 million, 5,000, whatever participants, that can't be done for this amount of money, reviewers aren't going to like that. So even though we don't need those details in the budget and they wouldn't review them, make sure that you're in the ballpark at least. I don't know, Jean, do you want to talk about that at all?
Say that again. Which
I was just talking about how the budget needs to match the science that's
That's the
subject.
main thing.
Yeah.
These the discussion on budget is fairly quick. If it catches the reviewer's eyes when it seems to be out of whack. But in this particular case, it's a standard budget. They don't typically comment too much on it. It's mainly for you.
Mhm.
All right. If we don't include money for salary, should all the money then be included in other direct costs category?
Yes. I had to think about that. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know where else you would put it. Yeah.
And here's another question. What percentage of indirect costs should we consider?
Oh, you don't get to decide that. Your institution has a negotiated indirect cost rate. So talk to your grants office or whoever is going to help you submit the grant, and that's already predetermined. You don't get to choose.
All right. Let's see. Someone wanted you to clarify about whether or not no cost extensions are allowed.
Yes, now that we use this 3+2 funding strategy, if you get the award, no cost extensions are allowed. They have to be, actually, I don't even think the first one has to be approved. I think they can just happen. I mean, you have to fill out the paperwork, but yeah,
Yep, you should be able to do it through your ERA profile.
yes, yep.
All right. Another person's asking whether or not we use a modular budget.
No, a modular budget is 250K a year, and this is 300K, so it's not a modular budget, if I'm understanding the question.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, they said to check the RFA about saying it says modular in there. Double check that. Let's see. So a few questions on budgeting. Is there a budget constraint for instrumentation?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it has to fit within the budget of the grant, so you cannot buy a $2 million gyroscope or something like that with this grant. But as long as it's needed for the scope of the project and it fits in the budget, I don't think you'd want to buy a $1.5 million gyroscope either, because then you can't pay for anything else. But you don't need to get pre-approval for any of the equipment. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
All right.
It's very flexible. We intend for it to be flexible. So odds are it'll be okay, but it's always good to ask specifics. And that sounds like something we'd have to talk about specifically.
All right. And then a follow-on question to that is like, where do you put the budget and justification for other personnel?
I follow the SF424 application guidance. I don't remember the number of the section, but it's in there.
All right. All right, let's go on to, we'll answer, there's a whole slew of questions, but let's move on to review questions now. So, Jean, you are probably going to be,
You're on, baby.
yeah, you're up. All right. There were questions about what feedback you received from the different stages of the review.
So in terms of us providing feedback to you, in terms of the progress of your application, so we do try to once we move from stage one. So at the beginning, we acknowledge that your application is with us, and if you have any questions about anything, we assure you that RCCS, the Respiratory, Cardiac, and Circulatory Sciences Group, is well equipped to do your DP2. And we're available to answer any questions. Sometimes we provide feedback if we don't see that you're listed as an ESI, but we think you still are. We want you to get your record straight. After the review of stage one, we're talking sometime in January, between January and February, when the applications will move on to stage two. We will let applicants know if they're moving forward or if they're not. And then after the end of the entire process there, summary statements will occur for everybody only after the meeting occurs. We can't send summary statements back to the folks have a not discussed applications before the end of the meeting. So finished summary statements will be released only after the meeting.
All right. And then someone had a question on what you meant by rank score order. You could explain what
So rank score. So what we're saying is once we receive feedback from the mail-in reviewers, and the highest scoring applications are generally considered to move forward. So we have applications that with the highest scores move to the finalist round. We also have the editorial board members available to be able to what we call rescue applications as well. So applications that may not be in the very highest. We have room for applications that are considered high impact based on a combination of the scores and the critiques written by them. So applications can be what we call rescued, the ones that don't automatically by default hit the very highest scores there. And so usually about 80% of the finalist applications or so are there based on the final scores. So we do have 20 to maybe 30% that can get pulled over based on a combination of the scores and the impact. So I hope that helps.
Excellent. And we have a lot of questions. I think, Trish, this is geared more for you. How many of the applications, the discussed applications, end up funded?
That's a very good question. It varies from year to year based on our budget. And I think in general, over the past maybe 5 years, our success rate for the grants has been anywhere from 10 to approaching 15%. So I think it's more like 13%. So 10 to 13%. So if it's a 10% success rate, that sounds like almost half of the grants in the 20% discussed pile are funded. Now, very importantly, not all of these are funded with common fund dollars. So we promised to make, I forget the number, but it's in the funding opportunity. And we always make that many. Sometimes we make a few extra if we have extra money. But importantly, institutes and centers will come in and also pay some of these grants. And all that information's on our website. You can go through the awardee bios and you'll see, oh, this application was funded by, NIGMS, for example, General Medical Sciences. So that's one of the reasons it's impossible for us to predict how many will be supported, because we never know how many might come in at the end of the year. But I would say it's safe to guess that about 10% of the applications that are submitted, which is about half of the ones that are discussed, receive support.
All right. Okay, Jean, is there information online on potential reviewers or reviewers from past years in each scientific area?
They're not listed by scientific area, but they are listed their names, their positions, their universities, their departments are all listed there. The reviewers for this year's or this current cycle will be posted, and this is a general statement for all study sections where we have meetings. Reviewer rosters are posted 30 days before the meeting. So, and I think that you can go back to past meetings and find the rosters of the reviewers, and they should be delineated in terms of the in-person or the discussion members, the editorial board stage 2 members versus the mail-in reviewers. They should be delineated that way. So
Okay.
But that doesn't mean the same people will be used
absolutely
in
not.
future
Yeah,
years.
that's right. And in many cases, they're not.
Although there's often overlap, right, Jean?
Yep.
All right. And Jean, will we know if in advance, will we know if we advance to the second round so we can plan our other submissions accordingly?
You can sometime early next year, between January and February. We will let all the applicants know their status, whether they become finalist or they've not. I will tell you that a pretty good percentage, a significant percentage of applicants have the wrong email address there. So sometimes we send these notices out there and it goes to their former institution as opposed to their new institution that where they are in ESI. And so they never get the word. So a number of months later, they say, hey, I never received word. And we give them the good news, or or whatever news that they get, so they get it a little bit late. So make sure that your contact information is current, so that we can contact you. But we certainly will contact you at that decision point.
All right. And Trish, this might be more for you. So, if one does not have a lengthy publication record on the specific topic of proposed innovative research, but has a strong publication record otherwise on related topics, do you suggest waiting to apply, or have suggestions on including works in progress?
Now that's a tough one. You don't include works in progress. You include things that are published, right? So you can't say, I've got 5 manuscripts in preparation, because you can't include that information. It really depends on the science. If you're proposing something that requires like deep expertise, perhaps in neurobiology, and you have been studying the microbiome for the past all your training, I would imagine that reviewers would raise their eyebrows at that and wonder if you're really equipped to do the project. You can allay some of those fears with some preliminary data, or you can talk about, maybe you went to somebody's lab to learn techniques or things like that. You can talk about that. I think that you're going to need to convince the reviewers that you can do the science that you're proposing. You got to have the great idea, but you also have to have the experience that's going to convince them that you can do the great idea, that you can make it work. So I don't know whether that would mean waiting a year. I think I can't answer that in general, because sometimes if you wait a year, maybe it's not innovative anymore, right? So I think that would really depend on the case. So, if that person wants to reach out to me, they can send me an email and we can meet.
And I could say from our side, we have specific instructions to the applicants, or to the reviewers, that is, during our training, indicating that they should not take into account a track record, or it's more along the line of their expertise, their demonstrated expertise, the publications, the types of publications, the quality of the publications that they've produced. In fact, this is quite an item in our normal study sections at CSR. Is we do review all early stage investigators, or all new investigators, in one cluster there, and we specifically say it's not about an extended long track record of evidence down the road, but it's more about training, expertise, and current progress, including application or publications that you've had, and kind of the quality of those publications. So we ask them not to dwell on numbers, but to kind of look at their experiences there. So, and they do take that into account. Hope that's helpful.
All right. And I note that we're at 3:30, which was when we were expecting to end this, but we still have a large number of attendees and a whole lot of questions that have come in. So I don't know, Jean and Trish, I don't know, do you have time to answer some more?
I can stay.
I can stay too.
Okay. All right. Great. Um, so there's a question about how the preliminary scores are calculated, Jean.
So the preliminary scores are based on, so from the mail-in, I guess they're talking about the So there's two sets of preliminary scores. Number one, there's the preliminary scores of the mail-in reviewers. And the mail-in reviewers they read through the application and they provide their comments on each of the three scoring criteria. They provide criterion scores there. The criterion scores describe their kind of enthusiasm for each of those criteria. The one main thing, the real score that counts there is the overall impact score for that. So for one reviewer, they have three criterion scores, which helps to convey their thoughts on each of those three scoring criteria. But the overall impact score is the one that counts. For the three mail-in reviewers, those three overall impact scores, the average of those three overall impact scores determines where they fall on the list there. So it's based on that preliminary overall impact average is where they fall onto the list. Once it goes over to the next stage to the editors, they read through it and they read through all the mail-in reviewers summaries there, and they determine their own overall impact. So it's the three overall impact scores of the editorial board. That's not to determine who's going to get discussed and who's not going to get discussed, because all applications will get discussed. So no matter what score they give it, those applications will be discussed during the meeting. So that's the way that the two sets of preliminary overall impact scores work.
All right.
During the discussion at the editorial board, the final stage 2 meeting, the final scores are the scores that are determined by all of the reviewers that are in the room, the three primary reviewers, as well as the other balance, the 15 other members of the panel. Everyone scores, and that determines the final average overall impact score.
All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Trish, given the page limitation and the inclusion of references within those 10 pages, is it anticipated that these applications will have fewer references than a typical RO1?
Yes, in general, they do. I mean, I've seen RO1s with 5 pages of references. Obviously, you don't want to do that, right? But as long as you use sort of, the EndNote style, numerical style, and maybe put PubMed IDs in, you can fit quite a few in there. Make it a reasonable size font. Jean, you might want to comment on that. I think you can go a little smaller, but if you make them too small, you could get your application rejected. So be careful about that. But yeah, you don't need to reference 100 references. Be a little bit more selective about what you choose to cite.
All right. And there are a couple questions. If I accept a new position at another institution, would this grant go with me?
So the grants can be transferred, but remember, this grant's not your grant, right? It belongs to the university at which you are employed, okay? So would not be Trish Lebowski's grant. It would be University of whomever, wherever I happen to be. So that first university that owns the grant has to give it up. So, you want to leave on amicable I don't know, relationship or whatever. But yes, it happens all the time that people move, and the grants can be moved, but it's not a 100% guarantee. There still has to be some administrative things that happen in the background, and the program officer has to attest to the fact that you'll be able to do the research you promised you were going to do at that new site. So if you're moving to a place that doesn't have that $3 million gyroscope that you bought with your startup money and you need for the award, there might be a problem. So, think about that.
All right. Another question about timing. So, if we do not have a job offer yet, but we'll be applying and hopefully get one by September of 2024, can I still apply?
Well, the problem is the university or the institution where you work has to push the button to apply for you, right? And they're not going to do that if you don't have an independent research position. In other words, you're probably still a postdoc maybe, or maybe an instructor or whatever. If you can apply for R01s in your current position, then it's fine. And you could move afterwards.
All right. Let's see. Asking for clarification. So, can I budget efforts for my collaborators?
You can use the grant award money to support collaborators, but you don't need to give us those details in the budget at the time of application.
Okay, and will they be counted as key personnel?
Yeah.
Jean, could you clarify that the DP2 review does not use standard study sections?
I can clarify that. Everybody is selected specifically to review DP2 applications. As you can imagine, we get with all the applications that we get, we recruit a lot of mail-in reviewers, and we have specific reviewer training sessions. We try to keep them rather intimate. I mean, if you can imagine, if you've seen some of the previous rosters, you'll see a lot of mail-in reviewers. We tend to have smallish type of training sessions. So we go over the special considerations that are given to DP2 applications, the high risk, high reward, the 10-page review summary, the fact that you're not going to be a spot on reviewer, but you're to look at it in a kind of broader, more general way from the perspective of you within that general expert field. And you don't, if the research strategy doesn't speak to you in the sense of this heavy jargon, we tell them, well, they've been told, to speak to it as if they're speaking to a general expert audience in terms of the stage one mail-in reviewers there. So no, they're not regular study sections. They're DP2s, and we give them pretty granular instructions on what's expected, so that there's no surprises there.
All right. Thank you, Trish. Would being a co-PI on a five-year CDC grant from another federal institution for a different scientific investigation break your ESI status?
No, ESI status only considers NIH awards. So you can have an award from a different funding agency, government or not, and that's fine.
All right. And this is for both you and Jean. So I understand NIH encourages science from all disciplines, but it's very evident that behavioral health is underrepresented among the awardees. Are there disproportional submissions? I also noted that there were few psychologists on the review panel roster. How are behavioral health, specifically mental health, assigned in the review process?
Well, we do based on we try to get a representation of all disciplines. There are some disciplines that are more general, like in looking at the 9 categories of areas of science. You'll see some that can leak into different areas, like molecular and cellular biology, chemical sciences. There's some high throughput. So some are overrepresented just because of the nature of what they are. We do have biobehavioral ones, and we had a pretty good representation of them this time. We do get reviewers to be general experts within that field, especially for the stage one mail-in review, and on, so that they are able to look at it in a general way and understand the field that you're submitting for. We do also have, if you can imagine, all the applications that come in, in the standard big bulk. and the number of reviewers on the editorial board, we do try to have representations of all 9 areas of science on every editorial board there, and biobehavioral is indeed represented. Specific areas like what you're saying, you know, we expect the experts to be flexible, to be broad, and to be able to understand, you know, your explanation of what you're trying to accomplish within your grant. Hope that helps.
Yeah. And Trish, maybe do you want to talk about a bit about the portfolio of behavioral science and HRHR?
Sure, yeah, I saw that question came up several times. So you see the 9 areas of science that are included in that, that you have to put in so that in the very beginning of your application we've talked about already. And social behavioral sciences is one of those. What we've seen is that we make awards in direct proportion as to how many we receive. So in other words, if we get 2% of our, all the applications received are in the behavioral landscape of research, we make about 2% of the awards in that area. And that's not by design, it's just the way it usually sorts out during the review process. So we're absolutely interested in funding more of things that we have funded less of in the past, if that makes sense. So we want to balance our portfolio. We want to have as much representation, as much scientific diversity as possible in there. So actually, if you submit a behavioral social science application and you get a good review, you're going to be in better shape than somebody that submits something that might be more sort of biomedically relevant that you see. We found a lot of those. You get the same score, and if we have to make choices down the line, we'll probably favor something that's not as well represented in our portfolio. When you look in the funding opportunity, it says right there under how the funding selections are made that we can and do apply programmatic priorities to the final funding decisions. And the criteria are all listed there, but one of them is scientific diversity. And that means some areas of science that aren't well represented already. So while we don't have examples of them in the samples, and I apologize for that, we got to reach out, maybe get some more. That we have, everything we have is up there online. I think there's 3 and that's it. We don't have clinical examples either. Somebody asked that, but we want those. So we encourage you to apply. Don't hesitate. We want that kind of science.
All right, excellent. All right, so for Trish, about the investigator's qualifications, should we write more in the bio sketch, or is that better in the application essay?
Yeah, that's tricky. You don't want to be redundant. Don't put the same thing exactly in both places, as people are gonna read these. They're gonna read both, and sometimes reviewers get annoyed if they feel like they're reading the same thing. You already said that 3 times already. Stop it. But so you can use both spaces, but don't be redundant. Yeah, I think it's fine to put a little bit of that in both places, if that makes sense, Becky.
Okay, great. Um, all right, so so non-tenure track folks, if independent, can apply, but you also said that they should apply from the institution where they will, I think, where they will be conducting the research. So tenure track job application season is after the deadline. So what happens if I change institutions between the application and award?
Well, I think I already answered this, right? The institution applies for you, so you have to be eligible to be an independent researcher and eligible to submit the grant from your institution, or you can't, forget it, right? And then if you get the award through the institution that submitted it, and then you move, then you'll have to go through what I talked about transferring the award. So the program officer has to agree that you can still do the research at the new home, and the original institution has to agree to release the award. So it can be done. It's not easy. It's not like a rubber stamp, but it can be done.
All right. And do you need to be a US citizen to apply?
No, you can be, you don't need to be a US citizen, but you do need to be at a US institution. So you can be any citizenship, but if you're somewhere in the US, that's fine. If you're in, I don't know, somewhere in Canada, UK, wherever, no, you can't apply. You have to be here in the US.
All right. And what is the recommended length for each section of the research strategy essay? I checked the innovation section of some sample applications, but they seem to be quite short.
Well, I think that you should embed that information throughout. Yeah, you have a separate area to discuss it, but you're not limited to not discussing innovation elsewhere. We don't really have recommended lengths for those sections. Sometimes it might take longer for certain kinds of applications than others. So it's whatever you need to convince the reviewers that it's innovative. It might be easy to convince them because you're doing something no one's ever heard of before. It might be a little bit harder, especially if it's conceptual versus technical. It's really up to you to decide on the balance there.
All right. And how do people get feedback on whether their proposal or project is a good fit for the DP2?
Well, as I said before, we take any science within the NIH mission space. So if it impacts human health, you're fine. You can email me. You can email me I don't know, a paragraph or a page or whatever, and I can tell you, but odds are I'm hard pressed to really find many that are not appropriate. Yeah, it's not like when an award program is at a single institute or center, like if you were applying to something for NCI cancer. And if your application's not on cancer, then you don't need to apply, right? It's not like that. We'll take anything.
All right. Another question, do we have to provide a budget justification at the time of application?
Yeah, it's part of the SFR 424. So yes.
Right. And Jean, is a cover letter recommended to include what areas of reviewer specialization are best suited to review the application?
Any help to the SRO is always appreciated. If you feel like you want to point out, what we're going to do is look, through your abstract and through the research strategy and kind of see, what area. But truly, the main thing that we look at is that agency routing number, those two codes regarding the bio the 9 areas of science that are delineated. So that's our first cut. Is we try to match. Again, we don't try to match them spot on for reviewers. We try to match it with the general topic area. So when we do that mainly with those routing numbers there, and we do take a peek at kind of the topic of your application. Feel free to add anything you'd like in the cover letter. That's always helpful as well, but it's not necessary.
All right. And then we have a question, another one for Eugene. How can someone become a reviewer, and can someone with ESI status apply to become a reviewer?
You can certainly let us know if you'd like to be a reviewer. You can certainly, but we generally try to identify reviewers based on their review experience from before. In a lot of these cases, if you look through the roster there, you'll see that we have quite senior members of the community, those that are used to looking at broad areas of science. And you'll see a lot of them are department chairs or heads of institutes, because we do want someone that is not afraid to jump in there and be able and has been exposed to areas of science, and they can see the interaction of one area with another. So certainly, we our goal at CSR is to expand our reviewer base. So whether it's for DP2 or whether if it's for our regular study sections, if you're an early stage investigators, you can become an early career reviewer, ECR, and CSR does have an ECR program. Feel free to Google it, go to ECR, and you can find how to apply for that. So yeah, the answer is we're open to communicating with you in every way. As far as this particular mechanism, we skew toward more senior folks in the field.
All right. And another good question for Eugene is when can you start using the scientific areas of a a DP2 proposal for other funding opportunities? That's
So are you talking about the agency routing?
Oh, sorry.
Number?
No, no. So if you have a DP2 submitted, but you want to use that proposal for another funding opportunity, at what point can you submit that idea to somewhere else?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I mean, and so some folks that find out that their application was not discussed, that just gives them a heads up. But the application is still in the process of being reviewed because it's out of the process of being reviewed only after the meeting is over and the summary statements are released and sent back. In that case, unfortunately, one would have to wait till after the March meeting and after they receive their summary statement. At that point, you're free to be able to use the same topic in another application.
All right. And Trish, a good one. How should we balance high risk and feasibility in a proposal?
Yeah, that is a good one. I mean, we want high risk, but we don't want completely impossible and, there's no way this will ever work in a zillion years risk, right? So you need to have a plan and you need to talk about the plan to mitigate the risk. And I think that's one of the best ways to do that. If this doesn't work, we're going to do this. We've shown that this works, or part A works, but part B we're still working on. This is the way we're going to approach it. So, you need to convince those reviewers that it is feasible at some level. And sometimes you can do that with preliminary data. Sometimes they will, I hate to use the word believe you, but your track record can show that you've done high risk work in the past. And so that will help convince them that, you're going to do your best to get this to work now. So it really depends, I think, a lot on the science that you're proposing, but the other thing that can be a problem I've seen is when people say they're going to do something that people have been working on for a really long time and they don't really have any new ideas for how they're going to do it. So that's another thing to think about. Why hasn't this worked in the past and have others tried? That's the problem when people don't publish those things, but at the same time, people in the field will know about it. So all that said, the answer is it depends, right? And yeah, they're not going to want to support anything they think is completely not feasible. So convince them of your plan. And if you have some preliminary data that goes toward that cause, that's a good idea too.
All right. And there are still some questions about budget asking for more details, but I would direct you to the funding opportunity. Look through the section there and follow those instructions. It'll be easier once you actually have the forms in front of you to see the information that's needed. And with that, though, we're drawing up to 4 o'clock, so I think we need to end this. If you have questions that were not answered or you have further questions, please contact us by emailing us at newinnovatorowards@mel.nih.gov, and we will answer them via email. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded. I will be posting the recording and the slides on our website at commonfund.nih.gov/newinnovator. Please give us 1 to 2 weeks to get those posted because we have to make sure that they follow federal compliance rules. But check back and they will be posted there. With that, I'd like to thank our panelists and for all of you for attending. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thanks. Email us.